Chosen one, there's a passage written in 580 AD that religious institutions have been downplaying for over 14 centuries, not because it's false, not because it's heretical, but because if you truly understood what it says about you, you'd realize you've had the power all along. You'd stop asking permission from people who were never qualified to give it. This 1444-year-old text comes from the writings of Pope Gregory the Great, specifically his commentary on the Book of Job. But what he wrote wasn't just about Job, it was about you, about the pattern of how heaven selects people who don't fit the conventional mold. People who look absolutely wrong for the assignment until the moment they prove everyone spectacularly wrong. Here's what Gregory wrote that they don't teach in Sunday school. The chosen are tested by affliction, not because God doesn't know their faith, but because they don't know their own strength until pressure reveals it. Read that again. You're not being tested because you're failing. You're being tested because you're chosen. The pressure isn't punishment, it's preparation, it's revelation. It's God showing you what you're actually made of. If you feel the weight of prophecy on your shoulders and know it's time, subscribe. And right now, type chosen in the comments. Fulfill the text. Remember when Morpheus told Neo, "I can only show you the door. You're the one that has to walk through it?" That's exactly what this ancient text is doing right now. It's showing you the door to understanding your chosen status. But you have to be the one to walk through it. You have to be the one to accept that the life you thought you were supposed to live was actually the Matrix, a construct designed to keep you comfortable, compliant, and completely unaware of your true purpose. Neo didn't feel chosen. He felt like a nobody, a corporate drone in a cubicle, living a double life, wondering if there was something more. The Oracle even told him he wasn't the one. But that was part of the test. That was the affliction Gregory was talking about. Neo had to go through the death, the doubt, the absolute destruction of who he thought he was, before he could become who he actually was. Your life has felt like the Matrix, because it is. You've been living in a system that profits from your doubt, that feeds on your confusion about your identity. Every time someone told you to be realistic, that was an agent trying to keep you plugged in. Every time you felt that pull towards something greater but talked yourself out of it, that was the Matrix adapting to keep you contained. But here's what they couldn't control: the glitch, the thing inside you that never quite fit, the part of you that questioned everything, that saw through the performance, that knew on some cellular level that you were designed for more than this. That glitch, that's not a bug. That's divine programming. That's the mark of being chosen. In the Bible, this glitch shows up everywhere. Moses had a speech impediment, a glitch in the system that should have disqualified him from being the voice of liberation. David was too young, too small, too irrelevant, a glitch that made zero sense when Samuel was looking for the next king. Gideon was literally hiding in a wine press, paralyzed by fear when the angel called him a mighty warrior. The glitch is always there. The thing that doesn't make sense is always part of the selection criteria. Let's go back to Job, the man Gregory was writing about. Job's story is so misunderstood it's almost criminal. People read it as a story about patience, about enduring suffering. That's the Sunday school version. That's the sanitized take that keeps you passive and accepting of whatever life throws at you. But here's the real code in Job's story. He was chosen specifically because he could handle what was coming. God didn't allow Job's suffering randomly. It was strategic. It was targeted. It was designed to prove something that heaven already knew, but earth needed to witness, that there are people whose faith doesn't crumble when the rewards get taken away. Job lost everything. His wealth evaporated. His children died. His health collapsed. His wife told him to curse God and die. His friends showed up to explain how this was obviously his fault. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong, in rapid succession, with surgical precision. This wasn't random chaos. This was a test with a specific objective, to see if Job's connection to God was transactional or transformational. And here's what Gregory understood that most people miss. Job passed the test not by being patient, but by being honest. He didn't sit there quietly accepting everything. He argued with God. He demanded answers. He questioned the entire setup. Job chapters 3 through 37 are essentially Job saying, "This makes no sense, and I'm not going to pretend it does." That's what passed the test. Not silent submission, but authentic wrestling with the divine. This is why your honesty makes religious people uncomfortable. This is why speaking your truth causes certain environments to reject you. They want the sanitized, compliant version of faith. They want you to smile through the suffering and never question why it's happening. But that's not what chosen ones do. Chosen ones are like Job. They demand divine conversation. They refuse to accept surface-level explanations for deep spiritual experiences. When Job's friends tried to explain his suffering with simple formulas, "You must have sinned, you must have done something wrong, you must deserve this," Job rejected their theology. He said essentially, "Your explanation is too small for what I am experiencing." That's chosen one energy right there, refusing to shrink your experience to fit other people's limited understanding of how God works. Pope Gregory the Great wasn't just a religious leader, he was a code-breaker in his own right. He looked at Job's story and saw a pattern that extended far beyond one man's experience. He saw the template for how heaven operates with chosen ones across all of history. And he wrote it down in a way that was just subversive enough to survive church censors, but just clear enough that people who were paying attention could decode it. Here's another piece Gregory wrote that will blow your mind. Sometimes the chosen are elevated in status not because they asked for it, but because their testing has qualified them for authority. Think about what that means. Your suffering wasn't punishment, it was credentialing. Every tear you cried in secret was adding to your spiritual resume. Every moment you felt abandoned was actually building the kind of faith that can't be shaken by circumstances. In the corporate world, we understand this concept. You don't promote someone into leadership without testing them first. You give them increasingly difficult assignments to see if they can handle pressure, make decisions under uncertainty, and lead when everything is falling apart. Heaven operates the same way. The difference is that heaven's testing is more intense because the authority you're being prepared for is more significant. If you are the hero with 1,000 faces returning to save the world, type prophecy in the comments. Answer the call. Think about 11 in Stranger Things. She didn't ask to be chosen. She didn't volunteer for the experiments. She was selected, tested in isolation, pushed to her absolute limits in that laboratory. The suffering she endured looked like abuse to everyone watching. But that same suffering awakened abilities that ended up saving everyone. Your isolation wasn't rejection. Your testing wasn't punishment. You've been in the lab. The difference between you and everyone else who went through hard times is that your trials were specifically designed to activate abilities that were dormant. You weren't just surviving, you were being forged into a weapon against the very darkness that tried to destroy you. When 11 flipped that van with her mind, nobody questioned if she was chosen anymore. When she closed the gate to the upside down, there was no debate about her purpose. Your moment is coming where what you've been carrying will manifest in ways that make your selection undeniable. The lab season is ending. The demonstration season is beginning. Let's get into the actual text because the Bible is packed with chosen one codes that hide in plain sight. Jeremiah 1:5 says, "Before I formed you in the womb I knew you, before you were born I set you apart." That's not poetic language. That's a direct statement that your selection happened before your birth. Your purpose predates your problems. Your assignment is older than your trauma. Ephesians 1:4 takes it even further. He chose us in Him before the creation of the world. Before the world. Not before you were born. Before the world existed, you were selected for this specific time, this specific assignment. That means every obstacle you face was factored into the equation before you ever encountered it. Nothing is surprising heaven. Nothing is derailing the plan. Everything is unfolding exactly as designed. Romans 8:28 is the verse people quote when they're trying to make you feel better. All things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. But read it closely. It doesn't say all things are good. It says all things work together for good. Even the bad things, even the betrayals, even the losses. They're all ingredients in a recipe that produces something you can't see yet, but heaven has been cooking the entire time. You know why Harry Potter resonated with millions of people? Because it's the chosen one story we all recognize in our bones. Harry was literally marked as a baby. He didn't choose the scar. He didn't volunteer to be the one who could defeat Voldemort. The prophecy existed before he could understand it. His entire childhood was spent not knowing who he really was while living in a cupboard under the stairs with people who hated him for being different. Sound familiar? You've been living in spaces too small for who you actually are. You've been surrounded by people who resented your difference instead of celebrating it. You've had this mark on you that you didn't ask for. This thing that set you apart, and for years it felt more like a curse than a blessing. But here's the code in Harry's story. The prophecy said either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. That means the very thing trying to kill you is actually tied to your destiny. The enemy wouldn't be attacking you this hard if you weren't a legitimate threat. Voldemort created his own enemy by trying to kill Harry as a baby. Your opposition is proof of your purpose. Here's where Gregory's commentary gets really interesting. He wrote about Job's restoration at the end of the story and noticed something crucial. Job didn't just get back what he lost, he got double. The Bible says God blessed the latter part of Job's life more than the beginning. Job ended up with twice as much livestock, twice as much wealth. He had the same number of children, but the text emphasizes their beauty and gives them names, something it didn't do for his first set of children. Gregory's interpretation: the double portion isn't just material, it's spiritual authority. Job walked through the fire and came out with twice the influence, twice the wisdom, twice the ability to speak to heaven and earth with authority. His friends had to come to him for intercession at the end. The man they judged became the priest they needed. This is what's coming for you. Not just restoration of what you lost, but multiplication. Not just getting back to where you were, but exceeding it exponentially. The enemies who watched you fall are going to need your intercession. The people who counted you out are going to need what you carry. Your latter is going to be so much greater than your former that it will make the suffering make sense. The Avengers Assembly. Think about how the Avengers came together. Each one of them was broken in some way. Tony Stark was an egomaniac with a literal hole in his chest keeping him alive. Steve Rogers was a man out of time, displaced from everything he knew. Thor lost his hammer and his worthiness. Natasha was carrying red in her ledger she could never erase. Bruce Banner was one bad day away from destroying everything around him. They were all chosen precisely because of their brokenness, not in spite of it. The thing that made them vulnerable was the same thing that made them valuable. Tony's near-death experience gave him perspective. Steve's displacement gave him clarity about what's worth fighting for. Thor's loss taught him humility. Natasha's past gave her empathy. Bruce's monster became his secret weapon. Your wounds aren't weaknesses, they're weapons. The thing you thought disqualified you is actually what qualifies you. Heaven doesn't need perfect people. It needs people who've been broken and put back together with gold in the cracks. That's the Japanese art of kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with gold, making it more valuable than it was before it broke. You're being repaired with gold right now. Let's break down the actual biblical pattern, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Every major chosen one in Scripture follows the same trajectory, and it matches what Gregory identified in his commentary. The pattern has 5 stages, and you need to know which one you're in right now. Stage 1. The unlikely selection. Moses was a murderer hiding in the desert. David was a shepherd boy nobody thought about. Esther was an orphan. Gideon was hiding from enemies. Ruth was a foreigner. Peter was an uneducated fisherman. Paul was literally murdering Christians. The pattern is clear. Heaven specializes in selecting people who make zero sense on paper. Stage 2. The wilderness season. Every single chosen one has a wilderness. Moses spent 40 years in the desert. David was running from Saul for years. Joseph was in prison. Job was in the ash heap. Jesus spent 40 days being tempted. Paul spent 3 years in Arabia. The wilderness isn't punishment, it's preparation. It's where God strips away everything you thought made you valuable and shows you your real worth has nothing to do with external circumstances. Stage 3. The test of faith. This is where Job's story lives. This is the affliction Gregory wrote about. Something happens that makes absolutely no sense. Isaac on the altar, Job losing everything, Abraham waiting 25 years for the promise, Joseph staying faithful in prison. The test isn't about what you did wrong, it's about revealing what's in you when everything goes wrong. Stage 4. The sudden shift. Joseph went from prison to palace in one day. Esther went from orphan to queen. David went from shepherd to king. The shift happens suddenly but not randomly. It happens after the wilderness, after the testing, after the character has been forged. One day you're in obscurity, the next day you're being positioned for impact. Stage 5. The double portion. Job's restoration, Joseph saving the very family that betrayed him, David's kingdom, Esther saving her entire people. The chosen one doesn't just succeed, they succeed in a way that redeems the story. They get vindicated publicly. They receive authority proportional to their suffering. They become the answer to the very problem that once threatened to destroy them. Simba was chosen from birth. He was literally born into royalty, the rightful king. But he had to go through the wilderness season after his father's death. He lived in exile, eating bugs with Timon and Pumbaa, trying to forget who he was and pretend his past didn't matter. Hakuna Matata was his coping mechanism, not his destiny. Then Rafiki showed up and hit him with that stick. The past can hurt, but the way I see it, you can either run from it or learn from it. That's the moment Simba stopped running. That's when he remembered who he was. That's when he returned to claim what was always his. The kingdom didn't make him a king. He was born a king. He just had to remember it. You're in your remembering season right now. This 1444-year-old text isn't giving you new information. It's reminding you of what you've always been. You were born chosen. You were selected before you were formed. The wilderness didn't change that. The testing didn't cancel it. The suffering refined it. Now it's time to remember and return to claim what's yours. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Religious institutions have a vested interest in keeping you confused about your chosen status. Not because they're evil, but because systems need people to need them. If you fully understood that you have direct access to heaven, that you don't need intermediaries, that your relationship with the divine is unfiltered and unmediated, you'd stop asking permission to walk in your calling. Think about what Jesus actually said to the religious leaders of his day. You shut the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You yourselves do not enter, nor will you let those enter who are trying to. That's Matthew 23:13. Jesus was calling out the gatekeepers who were supposed to help people access God, but instead created barriers to maintain their own authority. Gregory's commentary was dangerous because it suggested that the chosen are tested individually, that their relationship with God is personal and direct, that the affliction they endure is between them and heaven. No committee required, no institutional approval needed. That kind of theology threatens systems built on control. The Hunger Games strategy. In the Hunger Games, the capital kept the districts divided and fighting each other for scraps while they lived in luxury. The whole system was designed to make people feel powerless, to convince them that survival meant playing by the capital's rules. But Katniss disrupted everything by refusing to play the game the way they designed it. When she held up those berries and said she'd rather die with Peeta than kill him for the capital's entertainment, she broke the code. She showed everyone watching that you don't have to accept the rules of the system. You can create a third option. You can refuse to participate in the game they designed to keep you small. That's chosen one energy, seeing the game, understanding it, and then flipping the board. Psalm 139:16 says, "All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be." Your assignment isn't something you discover through trial and error. It's something you remember. It's something you uncover. It's already written. The question isn't what should I do with my life? It's what was I designed to do before I got here? This is why certain things pull at you even when they don't make logical sense. This is why you feel drawn to specific problems even when solving them offers no obvious benefit. This is why you can't shake certain visions even when everyone around you calls them unrealistic. You're not making up these impulses. You're remembering your assignment. Jeremiah felt this. He tried to quit. He said in Jeremiah 29, "If I say, I will not mention him or speak any more in his name, his word is in my heart like a fire shut up in my bones. I am weary of holding it in. Indeed, I cannot." You can't quit your assignment because it's encoded in your DNA. It's burning in your bones. Trying not to do it is more exhausting than just doing it. Moana heard the ocean calling her entire life. Her father built walls to keep her on the island. Her grandmother was the only one who understood that the call wasn't rebellion, it was destiny. The ocean chose Moana before she was born. The heart of Te was always meant to be returned by her. Every moment of her life was preparation for that assignment. Along. "I am Moana" wasn't a declaration along. "I am Moana" wasn't a declaration of identity, it was a remembrance. You're in your I am season right now. You're about to declare who you've always been and watch the ocean part in response. Let's end where we started, with Gregory's text from 1444 years ago. He wrote this for you. He wrote it for the person who would read it 14 centuries later and finally understand that the affliction wasn't random, that the selection wasn't a mistake, that the testing was always preparation for elevation. You're not crazy for believing you're chosen when your life looks nothing like success. You're not delusional for holding on to faith when everything visible contradicts it. You're not prideful for knowing you're designed for impact when you're currently in obscurity. You're operating on a frequency that requires spiritual ears to understand. The same people who called Noah crazy for building an ark in the desert had to watch him float away when the floods came. The same people who mocked Joseph's dreams had to bow down to him when his dreams materialized. The same people who counted David out watched him kill their giant. The pattern is biblical. The pattern is proven. The pattern is being repeated in your life right now. Gregory wrote one more thing that will carry you through whatever comes next. The chosen often don't see their own strength until they look back on what they survived. You're going to look back on this season and be amazed at what you endured. You're going to see the divine strategy in every setback. You're going to understand why the no's were protecting you and the yeses were positioning you. The chosen one is you. This isn't metaphorical. This isn't motivational fluff. This is the actual truth that's been hidden in plain sight for over 1,000 years. You are chosen, not because you're perfect, not because you earned it, but because before the foundation of the world, heaven looked at this exact moment in history and said, "We need someone who can handle this assignment. We need someone who won't quit when it gets hard. We need someone who will keep believing when all evidence points to failure." And they chose you. The affliction you're in right now, that's not evidence against your selection. That's evidence for it. The pressure you're under, that's not punishment. That's preparation. The isolation you feel, that's not rejection. That's protection. Everything is setting you up for the double portion that's already assigned to your name. Walk in it. Own it. Stop apologizing for the calling you didn't ask for but can't escape. Stop shrinking to fit spaces that were never designed to hold you. Stop questioning what heaven confirmed before you were born. You're chosen. You've always been chosen. And now, 1444 years after Gregory wrote it down, you finally know why. Now that you know you're chosen, everything shifts, knowledge activates, understanding triggers movement. This isn't just information, it's ignition. The moment you accept your chosen status, dormant gifts start waking up, abilities you didn't know you had start manifesting, doors you didn't knock on start opening. This is what happens to Peter when Jesus said, "You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church." Peter wasn't different after Jesus said it, but Peter's understanding of who he was changed everything. He went from a fisherman who denied Christ 3 times to the foundation of the early church. Same person, different revelation. That's the power of knowing you're chosen. You're about to walk with different confidence. You're about to speak with different authority. You're about to make decisions with different boldness. Why? Because people who know they're chosen don't move like people who are hoping to be picked. You were already picked before the foundation of the world. Now you just have to walk like it. The Black Panther Mantle. When T'Challa drank the heart-shaped herb and visited the ancestral plane, he met his father. T'Chaka told him, "You are a good man with a good heart, and it's hard for a good man to be a king." T'Challa was wrestling with whether he was worthy of the mantle, but his father reminded him that worthiness wasn't the question, responsibility was. You've been wrestling with worthiness too. Am I good enough? Am I qualified enough? Do I deserve this calling? Wrong questions. The question is, will you accept the responsibility that comes with being chosen? Will you carry the weight of the assignment even when it's heavy? Will you wear the mantle even when it's uncomfortable? T'Challa became Black Panther not because he was perfect, but because he was next. Because the mantle was his by birthright and by divine design. He had to fight Killmonger to keep it. He had to prove he could protect Wakanda. But he was always chosen. The battles just confirmed it. Your battles are confirmation, not contradiction. Here's what nobody warns you about. The moment you accept your chosen status, warfare intensifies. Not because you did something wrong, but because you became a bigger threat. The enemy doesn't waste ammunition on people who aren't dangerous. If you're under heavy attack right now, congratulations. You just confirmed your assignment. Look at Jesus. The moment the heavens opened and God said, "This is my beloved Son," the Spirit immediately drove him into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. Immediately. Not eventually. Not after a grace period. Immediately after confirmation came confrontation. The enemy knew what heaven just announced, and he had to test it. So if life got harder after you started believing you're chosen, that's not evidence you're wrong. That's evidence you're right. The enemy attacks what he fears. He fears chosen ones who know who they are because he can't manipulate people who understand their identity. Confusion is his weapon. You just took it out of his hand by accepting your selection. In Star Wars, Luke Skywalker was a farmer on Tatooine, living a boring life. The moment Obi-Wan told him about the Force, about his father, about his destiny, everything changed. Stormtroopers showed up. His aunt and uncle were killed. He had to leave everything behind. Accepting your calling doesn't make life easier. It makes it matter more. The beautiful thing about divine selection is that it's irreversible. People can hate you. Circumstances can oppose you. The enemy can attack you. But nobody can unchoose what heaven chose. Isaiah 14:27 says, "The Lord Almighty has purposed, and who can thwart him? His hand is stretched out, and who can turn it back?" Pharaoh tried to stop Moses, threw every plague at him, chased him to the Red Sea, used all the military might of Egypt to prevent what God ordained. The Red Sea parted. Pharaoh's army drowned. Goliath tried to stop David, mocked him, threatened him, had every physical advantage. One stone. Saul tried to stop David for years. Threw spears, hunted him, turned the kingdom against him. David still became king. You've had your own Pharaohs, Goliaths, and Sauls, people who tried to stop what heaven started, circumstances that looked insurmountable, opposition that seemed overwhelming. But you're still here, you're still standing, you're still moving forward. That's not luck. That's divine protection. That's what happens when you're chosen. The universe conspires to get you where you're supposed to be. Let's get practical. How do you actually walk in this chosen one reality? How do you operate from this 1444-year-old revelation in 2026? Here's the breakdown, the actual playbook for activated chosen ones who understand the ancient text. First, stop asking permission from people who can't see what you see. Gregory wrote that the chosen receive affliction to reveal their faith to themselves, not to prove it to others. You don't need validation from people who are operating on a lower frequency. Move anyway. Second, embrace the wilderness. Every major biblical figure had their wilderness. That's where the real formation happens. Your wilderness has a purpose. Trust the process. Third, separate from environments that require you to shrink. If being around certain people requires you to pretend you're not chosen, minimize that contact. If staying in certain spaces demands you play small, leave. Don't look back at what you're called to leave. The Wonder Woman Awakening. Diana grew up on Themyscira, not knowing she was a god. She trained as a warrior, but she didn't know her full identity. Then Steve Trevor crashed onto the island, and everything changed. Diana discovered through battle that she was so much more than she thought. The moment she crossed her bracelets and unleashed that shockwave, she wasn't discovering new power. She was remembering what was always there. You're in your bracelet crossing moment. You're about to unleash what's been dormant. You're about to remember you're not just a warrior, you're divine. You've been operating at a fraction of your capacity because you didn't know your full identity. Now you know. Now you activate. Now you unleash. Here's the revelation that breaks the final code. The reason this 1444-year-old text is resonating with you right now isn't coincidence. It's confirmation. You were supposed to find this message at this exact moment in your journey. Gregory wrote it in 580 AD, but it was written for you in 2026. That's how divine timing works. Habakkuk 2:3 says, "For the revelation awaits an appointed time. It speaks of the end, and will not prove false. Though it linger, wait for it. It will certainly come, and will not delay." This word was delayed for 1,444 years, until it reached you at the appointed time. Everything you've been through was leading you to this moment of recognition. The chosen one always doubts. Moses said, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh?" Gideon said, "How can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest." Jeremiah said, "I'm only a child." Every single chosen one doubted their selection initially. That's part of the pattern. The doubt doesn't disqualify you, it's actually part of the qualification process. Why? Because people who think they're qualified often aren't. People who are certain they deserve it usually don't. But people who doubt, who question, who feel inadequate, those are the ones who stay humble enough to let heaven work through them, instead of trying to do it all in their own strength. So here's what you do with this revelation. Here's how you close the code and activate what Gregory wrote 1444 years ago. You accept it. Not partially, not conditionally, not with a backup plan in case it doesn't work out. You accept your chosen status the way David accepted the crown, knowing it was already his, fighting anyone who tried to take it, wearing it with the confidence that comes from divine appointment. You stop explaining yourself to people who are determined to misunderstand you. You stop defending your decisions to people who aren't on your assignment. You stop waiting for everyone to agree before you move. Chosen ones move with or without consensus. They move with or without applause. They move because heaven said move, and that's the only approval they need. You start speaking like someone who's chosen, not arrogantly, not self-righteously, but with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing whose you are. When people ask what you're building, you tell them. When they ask where you're going, you explain. When they say it's impossible, you smile and keep moving because you've read the end of the book and you know how this story ends for the chosen. You embrace the double portion that's coming. You prepare for the sudden shift. You get ready for Joseph's moment. One day in prison, next day in the palace. You position yourself for Esther's moment. One day an orphan, next day a queen. You anticipate Job's moment, twice as much at the end as you had at the beginning. It's coming. Gregory wrote it. Heaven confirmed it. History proves it, and you're next. The text was written for you. To learn how to read the signs and walk your destined path, click the video on your screen right now.